Hello, Cottage Lane. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited that we have Daniel Jude Miller with us, and he was so kind to donate all those books to our library. So we're so excited to have all these signed picture books by him. And he's not only an author, he's a publisher, an illustrator, a web designer. He does so many cool things. So I can't wait to hear from him.
All right, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Daniel Jude Miller, and I'm coming to you. I always tell all the students this because it's a little weird when you don't know where I am. I am in upstate New York, so I'm not very, very far from you, and I have been down in your area many, many times before at a whole bunch of different other schools. Okay, so I'm not very far, and there's a reason I tell you that because we're going to talk about where I live a little bit. All right, so I am a person that makes books, and we're going to talk about all the fun parts that go into doing that. Because I make picture books, and I make chapter books, and I also make middle grade novels, and I'll also get to do the drawings. So I have a lot of things that I want to share with you today. But before we talk about any of that, I want to get to the most important thing. I do the most important part first, and that is this book here. This is the most important thing that I have in my office. And I'll tell you why it's so important, even though I had nothing to do with this book. Nothing. This is not one of mine. This book was given to me by a student at an author visit a long time ago. His name was Milan, and he wrote this book here called Pete and the Acorns. He wrote it all by himself. And then he did all the drawings by himself. And then he went on a website that you might have heard of before called Amazon. And he had his parents print one case of his very own story. He gave a copy to everyone in his class, and he gave one to me. Now, here's why I start every presentation with this book and why it's so important. Because when Milan created this, he was in the first grade. It's a true story. Milan was in the first grade. He wrote this book all by himself. He did all the drawings, and he actually had a book for sale on Amazon. And that's important for you to know because it means that if I can make books and if Milan can make books, then that means all of you can make books right now. You don't have to wait until you're old like I am. You don't have to wait until you're finished with school. I meet kids all across America that are creating books today. And some of you might have already started. And if that's true, then that's awesome. But if you haven't tried to make a book yet, then hopefully by the time we're done here today, after I've shown you how I do it, hopefully that will give you all the tools you need to get started. So let's begin with all the people that work at my company. Alrighty. So we have this person works for me. He's called the author, and he's in charge of writing all the stories. Then we have this fellow. He's called the illustrator. He's responsible for doing all the drawings. Then we have this gentleman. He's called the designer, and that's just a fancy word for the person who takes the pictures and the words and puts them together on the page. Then you have me. I have the best job out of all my employees. I'm the speaker, and that means I get to go to schools and libraries and meet students like all of you and hopefully inspire you to do what we all do. Now, I know what you're thinking. All of these people look like the same guy. And you'd be right. You would be very, very correct because they all are. And it's because I have to do everything that is necessary to do to complete a book. From the beginning all the way to the end, they are all my jobs. But that's not true for most of the books you see in your library, because most of those were written by one person, illustrated by a second person, a third person put it together, and then there was a fourth person for the cover, and a fifth and a sixth, and on and on and on. And they work together as a team. And that's fine. That's something you can do. If you have written a story but you don't like to draw, you can find someone who does, and you can partner up and you can make that book. Maybe you like to draw but you don't think you have a good idea for a story. Well, you can find someone who does, and you can partner up with that person and you can make that book. But I also want you to know that it is possible for you to do all the jobs by yourself. And that is what I do. But for me, it started a very long time ago. Way before I ever planned on making books, the only thing I liked to do was draw. And I've been doing that for a very long time, since I was in about kindergarten. In fact, here's a picture of me when I was in the 4th grade. I used to live in New York City, and I went to a school where they made me wear a very uncomfortable tie. But I love drawing, and I would draw all the things that most of you probably like to draw. Things like helicopters and airplanes, things like dragons and dinosaurs. I love drawing sports logos. You can see behind me, I have a big collection of baseball hats. We're going to talk about that in a little while. But I wanted to be a sports logo designer really, really bad when I was in around the 4th and the 5th grade. I used to imagine stories in my mind about knights and skeletons and how they would fight each other in outer space. And sometimes I would do pastel drawings with those chalky, messy crayons that get on your hands and sometimes on your clothes. So when I was around 10 years old, that's when I decided that I was going to be an artist. And that meant that I was going to have to level up. See, I liked playing video games back then. I still do. And when you play a video game, you learn very quickly that it's important to take your character and level them up, which means they need to learn new skills so that they can unlock new puzzles and advance further into the game. And life is the same way. Sometimes in life, in order to get closer to your dreams, you have to level up so that you can advance and improve and get better. And that's what I needed to do. And I did that by drawing all the time. I started drawing sports cartoons. Sometimes I would invent my own characters. This here is a ninja dinosaur. Ninja dinosaurs need people to fight. So I invented an entire army of monsters for him to do battle with. And the more I was practicing, the better I was getting. And soon I could draw realistic faces. Now, if any of you out there like to draw, I am now going to give you the only 2 pieces of advice that you will ever need to become a better artist. These are the only 2 things you'll ever need to know. Number 1, if you practice drawing a little, you're going to get a little bit better. But if you practice drawing a lot, you are going to get a lot better. I guarantee it. There are no secrets, there are no tricks, and there is no magic involved. I wish I could give you a shortcut, but I cannot. Because the only way to improve as an artist is by constantly practicing. And that's what I was doing. And at that time, I wanted to be a comic book artist. Now, if you look really, really close, you'll see that there's a date on this drawing. And it says that I was 12 years old when I did this Batman. And that brings us to our second piece of advice. Never trace your drawings. Everyone always asks me if I traced this when I was 12, and I did not, because I have never traced a drawing before in my life, and I'll tell you why. Because when you trace things, you don't learn anything. It's okay to copy like I did from a comic book or a magazine or a picture, because when you copy things, you'll make some mistakes. And that's actually a good thing, because when you make mistakes, you learn how to correct those mistakes. And that's how you become a better artist. If you trace things, you make no mistakes, so you don't learn anything. So since I wanted to be a comic book artist, I would draw things like this here, Wolverine. And then soon I was creating my own superheroes. And I would give them names and stories and superpowers. But I still wasn't good enough to get my dream job. So it was time for me to level up again. And I did that by going to a very special school. I went to an art school. And when you go to art school, you get to make art all day long. You get to paint, and you get to draw, and you get to sculpt and use cameras and computers. And they teach you how to do more complicated pictures like this. And every morning when I would go to class, they would give us an idea, and it was our job to illustrate that idea. So on this morning, they told us that we needed to invent a superhero that got all his strength from a strange place. So I invented a hero that gets all his muscles from drinking coffee. Yes, I know, very, very strange, okay? But that's how art school works. You go in the morning and they would give us an idea, and it was our job to create that drawing. Now, these are the last two drawings that I did before I graduated from that art school. And they look a little bit different, and here's why. Because I had gotten rid of all my paint and all my brushes and all my markers. And I had decided that I was going to do all of my coloring in the computer. And in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how I do that. But now I was finally a professional artist. And I got a job there in the Empire State Building, all the way almost at the top on the 65th floor. And I worked for a company that needed drawings like these. Drawings about business, drawings about money, things they would put into newspapers and magazines and advertisements. They needed me to do drawings about computers and vacations. They needed me to do drawings about medicine and insurance. Boring. I had practiced and practiced my whole life, and I finally had what I thought was my dream job. But it was nothing like what I expected, because I liked drawing aliens and spaceships and knights and monsters and superheroes, but they would never let me draw that. All I was allowed to do were pictures of insurance and medicine. So one day, when I was going home from that very boring job, I saw one of these. It's called a manhole, and it's the holes that they cut in the street that go down into the sewer. And sometimes in New York City, in the winter, steam will come out of them. And that made me think that it looked like smoke from a dragon's breath. And that gave me an idea. Maybe if there were dragons living underneath the sidewalk, then possibly there were creatures lurking all over New York City. So I started to imagine, what could be hidden in the hot dog carts? Who was hiding in the taxi cabs? What could be lurking down in the subway? And was it possible that there was a monster that called the Statue of Liberty home? That's not the real Statue of Liberty, by the way. The real one is much, much more impressive. So here I am. I just had an idea for a story. But I have a problem, because I am 25 years old when I get this idea. And I have never, ever written a story before at that point. Never. I didn't try when I was in school, and I never planned on being an author. I'm very good at drawing, but I have no idea how to write a book. So I have only one, well, I actually have two choices. My first choice is I could let someone else write it, and I would just do the drawings. Or I could level up and teach myself how to become an author so that I could do it myself and complete the whole book on my own. And that's actually what I decided to do. So I started teaching myself how to write. And the only thing I could remember from school was that we're told that every story has three parts: a beginning, a middle, and an end. But right at that moment when I was trying to learn how to write stories, I had just seen the Goosebumps movie, the first one. And at the end of that movie, the author R.L. Stine says that a really good story has three different parts. He believes that it is made up of the beginning, the middle, and the twist. And I like his version better. And the reason I like it better is because the ending is the most important part of your story. By far, it is the most important part. It's the part that people remember. The ending is the part they tell their friends about. And the ending is the part that makes them want to read your next book. So here's a fun fact. I write all of my stories backwards. It's true, I write the ending first, then the middle, and then the beginning. The ending is so important that I need to make sure that it is completely finished before I write any of the other parts of the story. But no matter what I'm writing, they always begin like this, a big pile of messy notes. Everything is spelled wrong, there are X's and arrows, and it's totally okay. It's okay because no one is supposed to see your notes. This is just where you're working out your ideas. And then I write it again, and again, and again, and again. Sometimes I meet younger students who tell me that they think they can write the perfect story in one try. But they can't, because no one can. None of the books that were in your library, nothing that you will ever write, and nothing that I have ever written was ever or will ever be finished on the first try. It's impossible. It's normal for everyone to write it and then write it again, and then fix it, and then improve it, and then make it better, and then write it once more. And every single time, your story gets a little bit and a little bit and a little bit better. In fact, sometimes my stories take about 20 different versions before they're totally complete. But if you're patient, like I was, then you too will finish your first book. And mine was called Monsters in Manhattan. And we don't have time to read the whole story, so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it. It's a story about a boy named Mike. And Mike lives in New York City like I used to. And he's very excited for winter break. He has a week off from school and a whole bunch of awesome plans. But he also has a huge problem. His cousin, Mary Lou from Kalamazoo, is coming to visit for the holidays. Now, normally it's a good thing when your family visits, but not in Mike's case, because Mary Lou is the worst thing that a person can be. She's a bully, and she's come to ruin his whole week off from school. So Mike has only one choice. He's going to go to New York. He's going to show her all of the tourist attractions, but he's also going to show her the monsters that live there and hopefully scare her away. So they go and ride on the subway, where they meet the trolls with their long fingernails that they use to hang off the outside of the subway cars. Then they meet a goblin with two heads that lives underneath the hot dog cart, and he has a long, sticky lizard tongue that he uses to snatch everyone's lunch. And they meet a dragon, the first character that I ever wrote. The dragon is old and grumpy, and he's grumpy because he lives in the sewer, and he can never fall asleep because of all the traffic above him on the road. And they meet a blob, the blob that lives at the museum where they keep the dinosaur bones. Blobs don't have any bones, so he waits there and hopes that some of them might fall into his slimy, sticky body. And they meet a giant that lives where they put the big Christmas tree every year. And the giant comes to steal the giant star off the top of the giant tree so that he can make giant earrings for his giant wife. And they meet fairies. The fairies are actually pretty nice, but you have to watch your fingers because sometimes they can bite. Now, there's a few more characters in this story that I didn't show you, but I want to talk for a second about ideas. Because when I got this idea, when I saw that steam coming out of the street, I thought I would write one book. That was my plan. But ideas are funny things. Sometimes when you have them, they start very, very small. But then they begin to grow on their own. And they get bigger and bigger and bigger than you ever expected. And that's what happened to me. Because as I was writing this one book, I was writing too many characters, and they couldn't fit into just one story. So I had to write a second one. And in the second one, now it's the summer. And Mike is very, very excited because he has 3 months off from school. But he also has a larger, sweatier, and meaner problem. No, it's not Mary Lou again. It's her brother, Jimbo Joe. And Jimbo Joe heard what happened to his sister, so he's come for revenge. Which leaves Mike only one option. He needs to return to New York City, go to see new landmarks, and hopefully bigger and scarier monsters. So they go to the Museum of Art, where they meet a goblin that tries to pull people into the paintings. And they go to the Statue of Liberty, where they run into a mummy who gets woken up by the 4th of July fireworks. And they go on the bus, where they meet a whole gang of zombies. And zombies only think about one thing: eating brains. And eventually, they find vampires. Now, normally, vampires would want to suck your blood, but not in my story. In my story, the vampires are just looking for a bite of your pepperoni. But here's the thing with ideas. They grow and they grow and they grow. And I know it says on this slide that these books were supposed to come out a couple of years ago, but they got delayed by some other stories I was writing. But this idea is still growing. And now it will be 2 more books that will come out next year. So I want to tell you that writing is a lot of fun. And both of these stories are already written. Drawing is a lot of fun, but drawing takes much longer. So even though both of these stories have been written, they're waiting on my computer because none of the illustrations have been completed, because they take much longer than the writing does. But you'll get to see these new characters. There's a clown that dresses like a ballerina. There's a one-eyed pickle. There's a supervillain. And there's a man who dresses like a monster, a man by day and a monster by night. There's a genie that lives in a dirty coffee cup. And there's a mutant with a whole bunch of arms that he uses to catch foul balls. And then when the 4th book is finished, it will become a game. All right? A game where you can make the monsters fight each other and where you can learn more about New York City and its history and all of its incredible landmarks. All right, so I want you to remember what I said about ideas, because when I got that idea and I saw that steam coming out of the street, I never expected it to grow into what it became. But it turned out it was going to be 4 books, a website, a game, and who knows what else. So sometimes if you have a very small idea, I want you to understand that you couldn't even know how big it's actually going to get. But now I want to show you how I do the drawings. All the drawings start out like this. They're called sketches. And they're just little drawings that I do with my regular plain old Sharpie marker. I have a regular plain marker that I use. It's very inexpensive, easy to find. I do all the drawings with that marker, and I do these to figure out what the characters should look like, or maybe how many eyeballs he should have. I do a lot of these. And when I finally like the character, I start working on what's called the composition. And that's just the word that means how all the pieces fit together onto the page. Sometimes I start testing the colors. And then I put it into the computer. Because remember I said I got rid of all my paint and all my markers. So all the coloring gets done inside there. I have what's called a scanner. And that is just a thing like a copy machine. So it's almost exactly the same as the copy machine. I put my drawing onto the glass, and then the scanner copies it and puts it into the computer so I can work on it with my coloring program. So once the blob is into the computer, I start by coloring in the background. And when that is finished, I work on the characters. And when those are done, I add special effects, which for this story is the green ghost fog that comes when a monster is arriving. So all the time, it's the same process, even if it's for a different story. This is a page from Everybody Wake Up. I start by doing my drawings with my black marker. When I finish all the sketches and I like my characters, I put them into the computer where I can start by coloring in the background, and then I can proceed to doing all of my characters. And then lastly, I add my special effects, which for that book is the light that comes when the main character yells. Excuse me. Always the same. Every book that I do and every page gets done exactly the same. And every artist has a different process, and so will you. Everybody makes art a little bit differently. But this is how every drawing that I do gets completed. But now I want to show you something that is not finished. This is the book I am currently working on. It is not even close to being done. Most of the drawings are all sketchy still. Only a couple of them have color. And I want to read it to you, but I want you to remember as I'm reading it that it takes much longer to do the drawings. The story has been written for a long time, but it will take me another 9 months to finish all these pictures. Okay, from today all the way until at least Christmas, it will take for me to clean these all up and actually put them together so it's ready to be a book. So I want you to remember how long it's going to take me. It's called Bruce the Spruce, and it's about a Christmas tree. It's also about a family that's leaving New York City, and they're moving to the country because they want to have a bigger house and because they're about to have a bigger family. They're going to have a baby. Boom! There's the baby. She's born on Christmas Eve, so they name her Noella. And on Christmas Day, Noella's father plants a tree below her window, and he looks up at his newborn daughter and yells, "Noella, this tree will grow alongside you. It will protect you from the summer sun and the winter wind. And just as this tree protects you, so must you protect it." Noella's a baby, so she doesn't understand any of that. But when she gets a little older, she brings stickers out to the circle of trees below her window, and she gives everything a name. The boulder becomes Rocco. The two big oak trees become Mr. and Mrs. Brown. The berry bush becomes Holly. And her birthday tree becomes Bruce the Spruce. And every day she plays on Rocco's back, and season after season, the trees look after her, and everyone is happy. Sometimes in the winter, she gives them a snowman. She calls him Carrot Face. The trees are okay with Carrot Face because he only stays for 1 or 2 months at a time. Little girls and little trees grow up quickly. So before long, Noella is off to college. But she returns every year around the holidays to visit her family and to see Bruce. And while they exchange gifts, she looks out the window and quietly whispers, "Merry Christmas, Bruce," to which he replies, "Happy birthday, Noella." Eventually she meets a boy and she falls in love, and they have a big fancy wedding underneath Bruce's watchful branches. And then they have their own children. And now there are new dolls to play on Rocco's back, and the family and the trees grow strong together. But after many, 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 many years, Noella grows old. Her husband is now gone and her children have moved away, and she realizes that country winters are much too difficult for a woman her age. So she decides to move to Florida. The problem is she forgets to tell Bruce. So the next day, the news, the neighbors, and the nosy bodies all gather around for something very special. But Bruce can't figure out what it is. And then he does. He smells burning gasoline, and he hears the roar of a rusty chainsaw. And right at the moment when he's aware of what's about to happen to him, everything goes black. But when he wakes up, he finds himself here in New York City, the same place where my giant lives. But now he's decorated with thousands of lights, hundreds of ornaments, and he's even wearing an enormously embarrassing gold star on his head. He hears the mayor down below announce, "Welcome to the lighting of our New York City Christmas tree." The crowd counts down. 3, 2, 1. He throws that enormous switch, and Bruce is lit up with those thousands of lights, making him even more embarrassed. The people ice skate, sing Christmas carols, and enjoy themselves immensely. But Bruce stands there alone and ashamed of himself. After everyone has left and the evening events have ended, Bruce overhears two men cleaning up below. One says to the other, "Did you hear that the country will get the first snowfall of winter tomorrow night?" And Bruce hears that and says, "The first snowfall of winter." He realizes that he does not want to miss that. So he has only one choice. He needs to escape. So the next day, the police and the fire captain go to the mayor and tell him that someone has stolen the New York City Christmas tree. And the mayor panics and says, "We cannot have Christmas without a Christmas tree. Find it, find it, find it." But nobody's watching as Bruce sneaks out in between the buildings right behind them. So I always stop on this slide for a second because when I was at an author visit a few years ago, a student stopped me in the hall and she said, "Is it fun to be an author?" And this is how I answered her. Yes. Actually, it's about the most fun thing you can ever do. And I'll tell you why. Because when you're an author, you get to pick the characters, you get to pick the situations and the locations, but you also, and most importantly, get to decide on the rules. Okay, your story goes by your rules. So if you think that a story should have dogs that can talk and only speak French, then you have French-speaking dogs. If you think that pigs should fly and only with dragon wings, then you have dragon-winged pigs flying all over the place. And if I think that Christmas trees should be able to run around New York City on their own, well, guess what? There's a Christmas tree that's now on the loose in New York City. They put up flyers. Where has our Christmas tree gone? But only the dog is noticing as Bruce scoots down Fifth Avenue, heading out of town. Eventually, it finds its way to the news. Where, oh, where could our missing Christmas tree be? But no one's watching as Bruce is cleverly camouflaged behind the Dress City truck. He's getting away, and they don't know where he is, but they know where he's going because eventually they spot a trail of fresh green needles. And they follow those needles through the night and through the woods and all the way back to the circle of trees where Bruce was planted, where he was grown, and where he was eventually cut down. Noella is woken up by a commotion on her front lawn, and when she looks out the window, she sees that the entire city of New York has converged on her property. The police and the fire departments, the horses and the helicopters, the citizens and the mayor have all come looking for something. So she runs downstairs and says, "Someone, please explain to me what this is all about." And the fire captain says, "Ma'am, if you'll just step aside, we'll be off your property in 2 seconds. We have just come to take our Christmas tree back." And Noella says, "Hold on. It's not your Christmas tree. There's been a mistake. This is Bruce's home. This is my home. I should never have given him away because Bruce the Spruce belongs here with me." And the mayor busts out laughing. "Bruce the Spruce, what a ridiculous name for a Christmas tree." And this makes her very upset. So she sticks her finger right on the mayor's little nose and says, "Mr. Mayor, you are very, very rude. So you will be getting no hot chocolate at my home this evening. But everyone else is welcome to hot chocolate tonight and every year moving forward because I have decided to stay here with Bruce, but you're all invited to return around the holidays to help decorate him." And the city is happy with this solution. So as the first flakes of winter begin to fall, Noella looks up at Bruce twinkling in the night sky, and she whispers, "Merry Christmas, Bruce," to which he replies, "Happy birthday, Noella." So again, that story has been written for many years, and it's been sitting on my computer. But even though it's fun to write and it's fun to draw, the drawing takes way more time. So it's going to take me again around 9 months to finish all these drawings, fix all the characters, add all the color, and put the pages together. The drawing always takes a lot longer than the writing part. All right, last thing. Remember when I showed you this drawing and I said that when I was your age, I really wanted to be a sports logo designer. And the reason why is because I loved sports logos. That's actually what's behind me. That's my baseball hat collection. I have over 300 baseball hats. No basketball, no football, nothing like that. Okay, and I always wanted to do just one sports logo. And then I got my chance. I got another chance to level up when I moved from New York City to where I live now in the country in upstate New York. I got a chance when I ran into this guy. We have a minor league hockey team here called the Senders. And when I saw this guy, I realized that there were a bunch of things wrong with this logo. Okay, and I'll tell you what they are. Number one, when you create a logo like this, you never want to cover up letters with a piece of the character. If you look at the Sender's arm, it's covering up the letter R and the letter S. That's bad design. Number two, when you do a cartoon, you do not want to give them gums because that makes them look crazy. Bad design. Number three, and the worst part of this logo, and we don't even need to talk about it, is what his chin looks like. Terrible, horrible, bad design. So I decided that this was my chance to level up and do a real sports logo. I was going to fix theirs. They didn't ask me, and they didn't even know I was doing it. And usually when you send teams your ideas, they put them right in the trash. And I was aware of that, but I decided to try anyway. So I spent a month working on this. And then I sent it to them and I forgot about it. I assumed it went in the garbage. But 2 months later, the phone rang. It did not go in the garbage. In fact, they opened it, they liked it, and they wanted to buy it. They decided to cut his head off, but they put it on the team's jerseys and on the hats. It was on the billboards around our city and even on the ice at our arena. And I was really proud, not just because I had fun doing it, but because I had learned something incredibly valuable that I wish I had learned when I was much younger. And that was that if there is anything that you want to try, anything, even if you only want to try a little, it's worth trying. Even if you assume it's going to fail, it's still worth trying because you really never know. And even though I was almost 100% positive that they would throw my idea in the garbage, I still tried, and it turned out that they didn't do that. And when they didn't do that, it allowed me to accomplish something that I had always dreamed of accomplishing. So remember that. If there's anything you want to try just a little, it's always worth trying because you really never know what's going to happen. But then I got a little bit greedy. And there was another team in another city that I didn't like their logo either. So I spent a month and I sent them this. And that was 15 years ago. So I'm assuming that this one is in the trash. But that's okay, because it was fun to do it, and I learned some interesting things while I was completing this one. Because sometimes when you see sports logos, there will be things hidden in them. If you look really close at the white part of the monster's arm, you'll see that it's in the shape of the letter S for Syracuse, the city where the team plays. And if you look at the shape of the way the monster is punching, it's in the shape of the letter C for Crunch, the name of the team. So even though they didn't buy this one, I had fun doing it, and I learned things while I was doing it. So, hold on one second. I'm going to come back to you now, and I know that was a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to see. And I hope that you were able to pick out a few things that you can use to start making your own books. Now, your teachers all have my website. And the reason I point that out is because if you have any questions, anything you'd like to know about writing or drawing, or if there's things you'd like to show me, things that you are writing, things that you're drawing, please send it to me. Have your parents or your teachers help you go onto my website, find my email, and send me your things, because I write back to every student that writes me.
Thank you so, so much for your time today. That was an amazing presentation. It was fun and captivating and informative. And I did email all the teachers the website, and they will have also the flyer where they can also send home and locate the website as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, Daniel. We really appreciated it.
Perfect. I've had a pleasure, and I hope that you guys will have a good rest of the day and an amazing remainder of the school year. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.